Hey everyone, welcome back to Jesse's Shed. We're back in lockdown, and so the kids have been using their bikes non-stop. We just got rained out earlier, and so it's given me a chance to bring the bikes up, clean them off, and I'm going to do a service on the PW50 and TTR50. Show you the basics of what there is to do on them, and then get them back out and get the kids back on them. First thing I do is clean them all down. You don't want to have any junk getting into that engine or into your carby or anything when you're trying to do the service. I always use a degreaser all over the bike. Just use something water-based and mild so you're not going to wreck any rubbers on it. And then if you're using a high pressure cleaner like I am, make sure you put it on a low setting. You don't want to be damaging wires and little fittings and things with a really high pressure. Also be mindful of where your air intake is and don't spray directly into it or directly down the exhaust. Once you're done, you can see it's come up really well. All that dirt and gunk is gone. You'll still have little bits there, but at least you can do the service nice and safely and not worry about bits of dust and things getting inside the engine or inside your carburetor and making it even worse than when you started. Okay, so we're all cleaned down. We're ready to start the service on the PW50. Super simple little bike. It's a two-stroke, so really easy to service. We've just got some gearbox oil that we'll change, a spark plug, an air filter to clean. Going to check the tires and then also check the premix on this thing. So this is a two-stroke, but it premixes the oil for you. You don't need to actually put it into the tank. We've got a little tank up on the head here that we'll go through. They're carburetted, so very easy to work on. Mine's running perfectly, so I'm not going to pull it apart, but in another video I'll break this down and show you how to clean it. I personally like that they've left these carburetted for the moment. They're super simple to use, easy to jet if you do want to change it a little bit. But yeah, great little bike for working on, very quick service and minimal things needed. So all you're going to need for this service is some oil. They only take 300 mils. I use the Fuchs Silkaline. It's a 10W40. That's what's recommended in Australia. We need an air filter spray, something to drop your oil into and then refill it with. And we're also going to use this a little bit of petrol to clean out the foam filter. And then all you need tools-wise really is a 10 mil socket, a 12 mil socket, a screwdriver, and that's it. Then we've got our replacement spark plug as well. So we'll get stuck in. The first thing that I want to do is the air filter. To get this off, to get to it, it's really easy. We've got two screws here we're going to undo. That's going to lift off the seat and all of this plastic cowling. And the air filter is then under here, and that'll give us access so we can drop it out and change it. There's just two 10 mil nuts here, well they're bolts actually. Loosen them off, spin them out. There's some bolts underneath as well, but you don't need to undo those. The seat just comes off as one whole piece. So with those removed, we can get him up and out of the way. Now that that's removed, you can see that's your air filter here. This is the intake, and it comes through and down and into the carburetor. Okay, there's one number 3 Phillips head just here, and then there's a spring clamp that you undo here, so you can just toggle him down and out of the way, and then we'll undo that Phillips head and it'll drop out. Pry it off like that, and then he drops out the bottom here. When you've removed this, make sure to cover that with something, because this has now got no filter, and that's going to go, whatever falls into that will either get lodged in your carburetor or will actually make it into the piston and you risk damaging something. Given how low these bikes are and how close to the ground and the dirt and dust the intake is on this air filter, you can actually see there's a lot of junk around it. these get dirty really fast, so they're a good item to clean pretty regularly. This bike's only been run for 10 hours, so we'll see what it looks like after that. There you go. That's why you service them regularly. All of the dry grasses are getting sucked into that and then into that filter. 10 hours and that's filthy. But it is doing its job. If you look on this side, nothing's getting through. Now I know there's special chemicals and everything you can use to clean these, and sort of the right way to do it, so don't do what I do, but this is just some petrol in a tin. You throw that in, squeeze it around a bit, obviously using all of my safety equipment. And it does a really good job of cleaning it up. I'm not advocating this to anybody, but it works really well to me, or for me. See, after a few seconds of cleaning, it's looking great. Now you just do this a couple of times. Obviously the first time, you're gonna get a lot of junk. You look at everything that's come out of that already. And that was all of the oil from the foam has caught that dust. And that's it down the bottom there, sort of coagulating into the fuel. So do one main clean, tip out that fuel, and then clean it again, and then let it dry out really well. Obviously if you do it this way, you don't want to have any naked flames around. I do the same thing for the actual housings. It gets the problem at the moment is that oil that's all over the foam filter is keeping everything stuck to the housing as well. The fuel just breaks that down, and then it lets you do a proper clean with some water, and then you just let everything dry right out. If you do use fuel, I tend to take the rubber pieces off because it just hardens them over time. So, see, that just clips out, and then you can clean the plastic bit. There's no seals in this, it's just where the foam, it just sits in that channel there and then seals. So you don't have to worry about rubber seals. Now while our air filter is drying out, we'll just do the plug quickly. You don't have to change the plug, but being a two-stroke, if the bike's not really being run hard, and normally these aren't, they're just little kids running them, the plug can tend to foul up a bit, and I just find it's easier to replace them during a service. They're really cheap, and you don't have to then worry about the thing dying out in the middle of the field somewhere or when you're down at the track. I forgot to mention you'll need a plug spanner for this. One comes in the kit normally with the service manual, so if you're looking for it, just check there. Otherwise, it's a 21mm socket or a standard plug spanner. Just wind that out. Again, this is why we clean the bike beforehand, to make sure that that's nice and clean. You don't want junk falling in, but if you're going to leave that out for a while, just plug that hole up. So here's our plug. Most of that's just mud and junk, but it's been fouling up quite a bit. You can see the oil and grease around that from where it's not been burning properly, just from running at low revs. That's why it can be good to change them out, and then you know it's going to be good. Here's our replacement one. Gap him to the right spec and then throw him back in. So the gap you want to have on your plug is 0.6 to 0.7 mil. When you're putting it back in as well, I find it never hurts to put a little bit of dielectric grease onto the thread. It helps it come out again next time, and it helps with conductivity on the plug if there's any junk there. I also put a little bit of it on this end so that the electrode gets a good connection to your lead. Good idea to spin it anti-clockwise a couple of turns just to make sure you don't strip those threads. You get it seated properly and then turn it clockwise. And then when you do it up, don't go crazy tight. You've got a crush washer, you do need to get it fairly tight, but you don't want to strip that bore. That's it. Okay, one thing to note, that should not be on the end of the plug for these ones. If you see on the old one, they've taken that resistor off the end, so you just got to get a set of pliers and remove that, and then your lead will go on. That's the plug with the resistor taken off the end. Now your lead just pushes on nicely. That's good and secure. Once that's done, we can move on to dropping the oil, and we're getting close to the end of the service. They're a super easy bike, that's why I like working on them. Okay, so for the transmission oil, we've got our filler cap here. This is our drain bolt down here. It's a 12mm. You pull that out, there's a little washer behind it, so make sure you look for that when it comes off. You're going to dump out 300 mils of oil, and then we just fill it back up. It's a little bit awkward because of the position of the bolt and the stand, but you can get a pan under there. I find my handy dandy kitchenware always works well. You just crack that. Let's see if we can have some quick fingers. You'll notice this oil looks a lot cleaner than standard engine oil. When I do the TTR 50, you're going to see a big difference. That's because this is simply running your transmission. It's actually quite dirty for, again, for 10 hours use. If you look at that there, it's quite dirty for the fact that it's never been through a piston or anything like that. It just runs it'll sort of lubricates your transmission. Okay, so while the oil is draining out of the gearbox, we can do the air filter. That's had time to dry and all the fuel's now evaporated out of it. Don't overload these when you put them on. You just use an air filter spray. You can get ones that you soak them in as well, but I find the spray a little bit easier. It's messy stuff. When you get it on your fingers, it's sticky as, so you can wear gloves if you want. But just don't overload this thing. I've seen so many people pour them full of oil to where it's just dripping out, and you're actually impeding your airflow. You just want to get a good covering on the side that it's going to have the airflow going against, so it's going to catch things. You don't need to coat the other side. It'll soak through, and you don't want to overdo it, like I said. So you just spray it on, get a really good coating, and then we'll put it back together. I tend to scrunch it up, let it soak through. And that's enough. That's covered now. It's in both sides. It's all the way through. That'll tack up as it dries out and all the solvent comes out of it. And then to put it on, we just slip it on over the lugs that are there. Make sure that you don't crush it all the way down, but you feed it into that channel so that when you put the other side on, it doesn't get pinched in it. That's it. Fits nicely. Just throw the screw back in and we're ready to put that back on the bike. Don't forget to put your boot back on before you actually put it on the bike. Otherwise you'll be fighting to get it in there. There's just a little lug that lines up with, and then you just sort of feed it around and on. It's a bit of a pain in the butt on these things. That's it. So the transmission's had time to drain. I've put the sump bolt back in now and taken the filler cap off. When you take that off, make sure that you get the rubber washer out. There's one you'll see around the cap. Mine likes to stick in that little crevice there, so just make sure you don't lose that. I poured the oil that came out into a jug and I got exactly 300 mils out, which is what we're supposed to get according to the markings here and in the manual. If you look at the oil, it's actually quite brown for something that's only had 10 hours use. It's really quite dirty. These little things run on, they don't have gears, they run on like a constant sort of velocity system where the harder the kid pulls on the accelerator, the faster the bike goes, and it just winds itself up. So they actually sort of wring the guts out of them a lot. And you can see it, the little clutch plates and everything have obviously done a bit of wear to this oil. So we're going to fill it back up through here, and it's just going to be 300 mils. I just use a Silkaline 10W40. The 10W40 is recommended in the manual. You can use Yamaha or there's a bunch of other brands, but I find this works really well. I change it really often, so I'm not too stressed about getting an ultra premium oil. It's only a PW50. But if you're racing the thing or doing something sort of a lot more demanding, you might want to use a different oil. All right, so we're going to fill it here. It's 300 mils of 10W40 going in. Get yourself a funnel. It's a really bad angle if you don't. Now that the oil's done, you can put that air filter back on. Just remove whatever you've used to keep your carb clean. And then you just have to wiggle this back up and in. You pull that spring clip and then you just have to pop it over the little lip. Just like that. And when you put this on, just make sure to check that you haven't popped that little rubber boot out on the other side so that you could be exposing the carb to unfiltered air. That mounting screw goes back in. That's him back on tight. That's not going anywhere. So once that air filter's back on, that's it for the major part of the service. We've cleaned the air filter and re-oiled it, changed the spark plug, dropped that transmission oil and changed it out as well. After that, it's just adjusting things on the bike. Your brakes are both on the handlebars. There's no foot brake on this thing. So you want to make sure that the brakes aren't binding on when they're not pulled, but you also want to make sure there's no slack when the kid pulls it. You want it to just activate nice and smoothly. The adjustment is down on the brakes themselves on the front and the back. You don't actually adjust it on the handlebars. Same thing for the accelerator. You want the tiniest bit of slack where you know that it's not activating when the accelerator is not pulled, but it's going to give you an instant action and a nice smooth acceleration on the bike. When you do pull it, you don't want to have a big lag there between where it takes up. After that, you just want to have a general go over on the bike, check all of the bolts on the bike, the major ones that can get rattled loose. When I bought this thing, it had about 7 or 8 bolts actually loose from where they've put it together in the shop, and I guess the apprentice or somebody did it and didn't really have his work checked over, so have a really good go over with that. And then after that, you're just going to put the seat back on and it's ready to ride. So as always, I hope this helped you out. If it did, consider subscribing, give it a comment. Next time I'm going to do the TTR50, which is a completely different animal. That's a 4-stroke. It's not oriented more for older kids, but it's just a different riding style of bike, and it can also come down to your location for noise and things like that. I'm going to do another video as well comparing the two. I'll show why I've got 2 of these things for 2 different kids and sort of the pros and cons for each bike, and it might help you picking one, because I certainly got the runaround when I tried to get a bit of information on these things. Thanks again. See you next time.